This video is part of a series on experiences of the Enneagram from the 27 subtypes. I'm aiming to interview people of each subtype, so you get to hear and experience what those different voices and life experiences sound like. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for your time to do this interview today. Can you share with us the country that you live in, your Enneagram type, subtype, and instinctual sequence?
Sure, Matt. Love being here. It's appreciated. The invite. The country I live in is United States of America. You could probably tell by accent. I am in a northern state of Minnesota, so because we love talking weather here, it's a lovely -4 C today, so everybody can enjoy that thought.
Uh,
um, my my Enneagram type is a 2. And my subtype is a social 2. And my sequence is social self-pres, and then sexual repressed.
Thank you, Eric. The backdrop matches the weather outside then,
Yep,
in
perfect.
terms of the fit,
Fitting.
yeah.
It reminds me, yeah.
So, Eric, when it comes to the Enneagram, when did you first hear about it?
I think around 2008. My wife and I kind of went back through and had to pick when we think we landed on it. We were doing a lot of reading and thinking around 2005, 6, but I think we ran into it around 2008 and took our own tests and kind of began to explore it.
Okay. Where did you first, what was the source or the context in which you first heard about it?
It was in a book, and I
Okay.
trying to remember the book it was in. It had to do with spiritual growth, and someone referenced that as something that they had done in their journey and actually taken the test 3 times before they figured themselves out and actually landed on the type, but then discussed how the insights were really helpful in their own progress. So we kind of were, well, what's that? So we went to look and learn more about it.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So since sort of 2008-ish, what's been your experience of the Enneagrams, over the years?
Um, so do you mean experience like personal or learned or what we've
Yeah,
done with it?
yeah, great question. I mean, good point. All of it, really,
Okay.
just your general experience. Yeah,
I think for my general experience for myself, is mostly challenging personally. It has a lot of layers, and the longer I've gone with it, and the more I've looked, and the more I've done reflection and my own work, it just keeps uncovering elements of myself that I use in a way to keep people either at a distance or self protect or so my experience of it is it's profoundly useful and helpful, but really hard to kind of keep looking at. When we took the test, I know one of the questions later too. I think we talk about when I took the test, it was a paper copy out of the back of I think the blue book,
yeah.
and so I came out a 2, which I am, and I had zero doubts. I when I started reading in the blue book about twos. My experience at that time was it was really hard to take in. I
Mm,
kind of wanted to throw the book. I joke about throwing the book, which I didn't actually throw the book, but I wanted to, right? Because it was just
mm,
so hard to look into the mirror. Um, of kind of how I self protect and use pride and all of the elements that go with too. So that's kind of been my personal experience of it. Um, Experience overall has been just profoundly helpful in understanding myself in relationship and others in relationship with me and across family and across clients and across work environments and just being able to see how each person is showing up and showing up differently and to
mm.
kind of make space for it. So been profoundly helpful that way.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, Eric. And I think you've mentioned something really important for people that are going to be listening to this that might be on at the beginning of their journey, going into exploring their Enneagram type and their self awareness, or can resonate with your experience of it. Because I've heard other people say the exact same thing. In fact,
Mm.
I had someone say to me last year, she said, it might be worthwhile that when you're introducing the Enneagram to someone and they find their type, just to give them a heads up that it might not necessarily feel that comfortable. And it speaks to, maybe it's different for different types. Different
Mm.
centers, maybe different subtypes will have a different experience of it. But for me, as a self-preservation six, I was like, I just want to know what my type is, and maybe there was a disconnect from the emotions of it.
Mm.
But it is an uncomfortable. It's a fascinating journey. It's a really important one, but it's like you say, um, it's not necessarily a comfortable journey.
Mm. Yeah,
um,
when people talk about other assessments or I've taken this or that, we always have kind of a caveat like, well, this is the mirror you may not want to look in, but it's
yeah,
much more helpful.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And what's really good about it is it goes, yeah, this is the reflection, this is the reality. Ouch, yeah, not nice. But it also points a way out of it as well. It doesn't just give us the bad news; it gives us the good news. For want of a
Yeah.
better way of wording it.
Yep, exactly.
um, yeah. So you mentioned that it's been helpful in your professional life, in your personal
Mm.
life with relationships. Are
Yep.
there like any extra specific ways that you want to mention that it's been like helpful in your life?
Yeah, I mean, professionally, it's incredibly helpful. I do some coaching, but I'm also a marriage and family therapist. So it's been really helpful in terms of my own awareness in doing that work and self care and what goes on with that, how I can get in my own way. It also increases empathy for everyone in my office because of how they're showing up or coming in or what how they present. Maybe is the best way to put it. Um, I've in my own personal journey too, with a lot of the spiritual readings I've done, there's a lot in those about true self, false self, and which overlaps with the therapy world of parts work, or in there's a thing known as IFS, internal family system,
Mm,
or parts work, or ego state. There's all those, and the overlap has been incredibly helpful because uh, it's so useful to separate out and begin to see the type is not who I am, but what I chose in order to keep myself safe or protect myself. Um, the thing I brought online out of myself to keep myself from pain. And
mm,
so people can read it and think, oh, I'm awful. I do these things. And it's actually, no, I'm not awful. My strategy may have awful behaviors or harmful behaviors or impacts that are difficult, but they make sense when we're trying to stay safe from pain and not revisit those pains of our past. And so there's strategies in a way, there's ways of being and like that, right? That's an ego. It's a part of me, but it's not me. So
mm.
it's been profoundly helpful in working with people in that because we tend to have a lot of guilt and shame and shoulds, and depending on your type, how you self manage, um, to kind of separate that out and be able to look at it and say, okay, it makes sense why I would do that, but it has impacts I might want to shift. So how do I manage or do that or branch out or so for myself it's been helpful that way, but especially with clients, being able to help them see it, acknowledge it, put it in its proper place, and feel seen and heard in that. So
Mm.
love it for that. The overlap's amazing between what it brings, spiritual growth, and actually therapy work.
Yeah, that is so much you've shared there. Thank you so much for that, Eric, because it's really profound that your first reaction to going, I'm a type two, was like, I wanted to throw the book. And then
Mhm.
over time, you realize, no, hang on a minute, this isn't me. This is a
Mhm.
strategy, and because of survival. I wanting to avoid pain, and yet I
Mhm.
can see the harmful ways that it's played out in my life, or the unhelpful ways, and the impact that it's had in my life. Maybe some of it's positive impact, maybe some of it's negative impact. Same for all of us.
Mhm.
Um, but getting to that place where you can go, okay, so it's not necessarily who I am, and so being able to create some distance between that and yourself, and also working with people professionally with it. You mentioned been really helpful for that, and how it
Right.
makes sense in other theories like internal family systems and parts work, like that psychological work as well as the spiritual work. And it's a tool that can be applied to many worldviews, and that's what's really helpful about it as well. Um,
Mhm.
and so, how's that piece played out in your relationships? Has it helped you to
Hmm.
sort of see other people that may have been or may still be really triggering, but how's that? How's, for want of a better way of wording it, how's it improved your relationships?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the primary one is patience.
Okay,
As a social two, um, I look way more like a get it done three.
okay, yeah,
Right? I've got to achieve. I've got to get it done. I have to continue to build the resume and make it impressive and prove to the world that I should be seen and lovable and cared for. And if any of that collapses, if anything got in the way of me being able to achieve, check mark something, get to the next level, a person who's just not feeling it today or is sad and you wouldn't know why or is disconnected in a work environment or friends who just don't have the energy to show up, my two goes into you're in my way, you're
mm,
ruining, you're collapsing, you're taking away, you're like that defensive strategy would really can turn other people into enemies quickly,
okay,
especially if they're not on board with what I want to do or see things my way. Um, and that was one of the hard mirror things, right? You're looking at
mm,
like, wow, the way in which I can pretend to care so much about another person, but the truth in the background is super selfish, like very into my own taking care of me and making sure I can achieve. And you're in my way if you don't get on board in a
mm,
sense. So it's improved relationships by me like setting that aside in a sense, right? Like that's a part of me that's being defensive and strategizing and telling my internal world I'm only safe when I achieve, only
mm,
safe when I prove my value. Um, Instead, it flips the script and it's like, well, where is this person coming from today? And what are they going through? And oh, they show up this way when they're this type and they're stressed or they're preserving themselves or they're right. So you can see that and it creates this gap, a time in which to slow down the reaction
mm,
and get into my own like okay, this is what I'm hoping for, but let's get real. This is just a task, or this is just a right a thing I feel like I want done to feel safe, but I'm actually okay. And how are they? Like it slows the whole thing down. It doesn't get rid of it. Like that's the constant challenge. I have a few friends who I'm very close with, and we talk about these things, and then they can do their behavior or the thing that comes with the type there, and I'm like, oh, they're such a this or that, immediately. And well, hold on, time out. Like, what is that about? Slow down. Why are we
yeah,
reacting now?
yeah,
In that judgmental, especially as a two pride, like, well, they have a problem and I don't, right? Like very quickly, very fast. So it's very helpful in that regard because it's just that awareness that gives a little space for notice, and notice gives me time to reflect, and then reflection, shifts my responses. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
I love that, Eric, and I can I can personally just testify to what you're saying because literally yesterday I was, in my room just thinking about something, and I noticed, Matt, do you realize how much you're questioning and doubting literally everything? And it was, I think before I would have, and I think this is what you've said, before I would have been in it and I would have been looking out at my life in the fog of the questions and doubts. But it's
Mhm.
like coming away from it and going, Matt, do you realize what you're doing? You have another option, mate. You don't have to question and doubt this. There is another option. And it's like what you're saying about creating some space, maybe a pause, maybe it's being like less reactive. And, I know the word being conscious isn't necessarily a comfortable word for everybody, but it is becoming more aware, present,
Mhm.
and until we have that self-awareness piece that the Enneagram does give us, although it's uncomfortable, it does, although it's painful and it's not a quick fix, I think it's a lifelong process for
Mhm.
different things, but it can give us that kind of like a wake up, you know,
Mhm.
do you see this and go in a different direction? It's incredibly impactful. Yeah,
Yeah.
incredibly.
Well, and what I love in parts work is that what we talk about is that part is forward. That part's which part is up front and running the show. Basically, who's
Ah,
driving.
okay.
Right? And if
Right,
I'm
yeah.
in the reactive and I'm in the blaming and I'm in the criticizing and I'm in the judging phase, well, then my social two's driving. I'm not
Mm,
driving. Right. And getting that work to like help that part of myself be part of the committee. I need that input. It has a lot of, knowledge and can notice things, but I don't want him driving.
yeah. Yeah, I
Right?
get
And
it.
so
Yeah.
how do you like slow it down, ask for the intel, think that part of myself, okay, I can see how that would be scary or reactive or
Mm,
mess with the strategy of keeping us safe.
mm,
However, can you just have a seat and let me consult with the rest of myself? Like, what else is here? And so that's been really helpful too. Just like slow it down, notice, and then ask that part to just, okay, let's. You don't get to drive
mm,
not today, because when you drive
mm.
and you're upset, it doesn't equal good things most of the time for my relationships. So
Yeah, and again, that's another beautiful thing that you said, because the important piece of when we're going on this journey of self awareness is that it's really important, isn't it, for us to have compassion and
mhm,
to be gentle because we're dealing with pain here, we're dealing with
mhm,
wounds, and like you said, it's set up as a survivor to protect us. So what I heard you say, without using these words, is not to demonize this ego that we have, not to
yeah.
demonize it. It's there, in some ways, it's there. It thinks it's doing a good thing. It's protecting us.
Mhm.
But I love how you said, I can thank you, but I don't want you driving. And I love that. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How long has it taken you to get from like A to B to C to D in terms of like going to ouch to where you are now?
Right. Well, it's 2023.
Yeah, okay.
It started in
Yeah, it takes time, doesn't it?
2008. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
and
does
it's
take
still
time.
hard. I think the one thing we don't give ourselves grace in is our neurological system is 1,000 times faster than our lovely prefrontal cortex that can be logical.
Mm,
So like I mean, it's just this slow arc of noticing and noticing triggers and noticing beforehand. I think the thing that's helped me as a social too is to set my day up early with silence, solitude, meditation, a little journaling, because I read so much energy and room and emotions and needs, and I pick up on them, and I have to kind of preset myself to be here and present and not in strategy. I
Mm.
my new favorite thing is calling all the Enneagram type stuff and the way we do this our strategizer. Like it my two is almost always in the future. All the things that have to get done, all of the things on the clock. If I don't get them done in time, someone can get upset. Like it turns on and it's like, that's lovely. Thank you for making a plan. But the plans are already fine, and we're not leaving any room for surprises or enjoyment or right. So it's like I do that preset. I try and do get alone because then it's just me not reading all the things. But I'm not done. I mean, it's still work. It's still noticing. It's still being present. It's still doing enough work internally on the daily to like be centered and be quiet and be calm and actually do the four thing and self care and like it's all the pre work and paying attention daily that helps me in the day. So, I mean, there's
Mm.
just a long way to go, and it's okay. It's like, can I enjoy the journey? Can I be wowed by what comes and how things shift instead of like trying to set it as a goal? Like, I'm gonna get all grown up and done someday, right? Like,
Okay. Yeah, because
it's not
that's like
gonna happen,
it's the ego.
right?
That sounds like the ego cleverly driving again.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Instead of just being part of the journey. Yeah.
yeah. Um, just going back to what you said earlier about being like you said something about being critical or angry.
Mm,
Is that more that's more internally rather than literally on people wouldn't necessarily know that you were being that way. It's
right.
internally.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep. Until I can't hold it anymore, then I get externally grumpy, right?
yeah. And that's where that arrow to 8 might come in.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and that's what I like most of my work has been heading off, right?
Okay.
For me, like the work we've done with CP and other reading and all that kind of stuff, it's really helpful is that go to four first.
Yes. Yeah.
Because for me as a two, I can take care of everyone else's needs. But if I do the same energy and input into my own needs, now all of that within me is balanced. Others matter and I matter. Others need care and I need care. And from that, then I move to eight to set boundaries,
Mm.
right? Now they're balanced. And that's been so helpful for me because I don't have to get grumpy or aggressive or go to those low side eight types of things because I do that because I haven't taken care of me,
Yeah.
right? I deserve space and time. I mean that's where that, but
Yeah.
no one has to give it to me. So yeah, I love that. So that work is like kind of the things I
Wow.
shared. I have to constantly
Wow.
be in that space of like doing for me what I would do for others. And then the balance is there. Then when I ask for boundaries, it isn't upsetting or shameful or overwhelming or
Mm.
scary because they're held in check. And I'm not disregarding others, but I'm regarding myself in the mix. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting to say that about the two going to 8 and starts, I'm I'm serving you and I'm giving you what you need, but you're not. There's a giving to get in that kind of thing, because
Mhm.
this ego, the way the ego is, and so it comes to a point, like you said, and the lid blows off, like rah, and so it's really I love that you've got that 4, going inside and then going to 8 in a healthy way. I love to hear that, Eric. I'm really pleased that that you're on that growth path, and that's how it's been so helpful for you because there's people out there, a lot of people with different subtypes, but as we're talking about
Mhm.
social twos, and they're having this daily experience, but they don't necessarily know that they're having the experience, if that makes sense, even though they're having it. And so if they could learn the Enneagram, if they could learn they're a social two and go, I I matter too, like my needs matter. And this strategy I've got of trying to get my needs met through meeting everyone else's needs is just not working.
Mm-mm.
It isn't working. Like, and we've heard CP teach, haven't we? And it's the same for all of the ego strategies, depending on what they are. It is relentless. It's
Mm-hmm.
relentlessly trying to get what it will never get. It's great. That's crazy, isn't it?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and even in my work in therapy, I'm finding more and more um, older adults who are basically ego burned out, coming
Okay.
in and wanting to talk about it and what's happening and what I've always done never works anymore, and this has always
Yeah.
worked for me, and I want to get me back, kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
and it's always such an interesting conversation because it takes a while to even get under the covers of you realize you're going for beyond quadrupling down. Like
Mm.
doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on what you've always done has exhausted your ego state. It takes energy to keep that up, and we've done it so long it's crumbling. It can't sustain anymore. So going at it harder isn't going to help,
No.
right? And
No.
it's interesting conversations to have because it we've done it so long. We think that this is the answer. I'm missing something. I just need more energy, or I just need another go, or I need a and nope, you need a complete shift, right? The opposite action things we talk about, and those moves, right? For a
Yeah.
social two to think, oh, well, stopping taking care of everybody for a while and focusing on all of my internal spiritual, emotional, physical needs and taking care of me, that'll be the thing that balances it. What? Wait,
Yeah.
that'll yeah, so it's a
Wow.
challenge because even our my whole system still doesn't want to go that way. Right? It's resistant, even when it's successful at times. So very hard.
Yeah. It is, but what a gift the Enneagram is,
Mhm.
isn't it? What an
Yeah,
absolute gift, because it puts language to the reality of what we're all going through. It just puts
yeah,
language. It gives us a framework, doesn't it?
yes.
And it
Well,
doesn't make it easy, but it does. It does. It's, like you say, it's like looking into a mirror. You know?
right, yeah, and that's another great point. Like the thing I also love in my work with it is it gives me a whole list of words and phrases and thoughts and feelings and experiences for each type.
Yeah.
And if I can figure out a type fairly early in sessions, I will just go to that language, and it's amazing how heard and seen people feel in that moment because they're understood in terms of what's going on in terms of their own language.
Yeah.
Is really powerful too for all of us because when we're in the midst of then like myself doing the work, it isn't crazy. It doesn't not make sense. I know what's happening. I know why it's occurring. I know what to do about it. It's just hard to
Mm.
do.
Yeah. And again, you mentioned something else that's really, really important is you're not only as a professional, you're not only working in the lives of others on a very deep level, and you would have been trained to have the compassion and the empathy for where they're at, but you've got that extra level of depth of I am on my own journey with this as well, and it's like this is not easy stuff, you know, but it's
Right.
really, but it's really important and it's really helpful in the
Yep.
long term. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
So, Eric, I know that you are a Christian and are spiritual. Like, can you tell me like what that journey has been like for you of Christianity,
Mhm.
spirituality, and the Enneagram? What's that whole journey been like for you?
Yeah. Where to begin with that? Grew up going to church in the Episcopal Church in America, so that's kind of like the Anglican version, the American Anglican,
Yeah,
um, which was a really good experience, grounding, very open, very good. I mean, they had a great youth program that made you feel safe, made you feel seen. Um, And so that arc kind of took on its own life. I found out that through different, more conservative venues, I could perform really well. and get marks for that. And so, as a social two, that worked really, really well for me for a while.
Mm.
Deep dove doing all the things and climbing ladders and getting value out of checking boxes and doing behavior. Um, then that kind of burns out. I mean, it just does. And the burnout um, uh, brought me to seminary. I figured, well, if I'm in my 30s and I don't know what's happening, if you just go read a book, that'll fix everything. Um, and so that arc was really helpful because I ended up in a spiritual formation class.
Brilliant.
Then I took like three more, where I started reading a lot of like the Desert Mothers and Fathers and people like Thomas Merton, Henry Nouwen, and you started to get this um, broader understanding of the importance of things like submission and surrender and patience and solitude and being. And so, in a totally different light. And so, it was at the end of that process that we ran into Enneagram as well. So,
Wow.
that arc kind of opened the door for me to like, um, I guess, consider a more generous orthodoxy might be the way to frame that up. And work through some of that stuff, the performance burnout, and then yeah,
Yeah.
today it's interesting. I hold everything very loosely. I'm not in that I have the answers space. I'm much more in the mystery of Christianity space and what else does it hold, and so not it's hard to answer the question like straightforward when people ask. It's internally it's pretty squishy, but it feels very solid. It's kind of weird,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Because I there's not words and answers and bullet points and verbatims and all of the things that people like, right?
Yeah.
Um, but inside, like the spiritual journey of it is this space in which being and going out and just walking and being present. I have a client who calls it downloads, where they just are
Okay.
present to what the spirit wants to do, and it's a gift. The Galatians 5 passage of all the things, like in my younger days, those were things I would do and achieve out of my own strength. Now things like patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness are things you receive
Love
in
that.
the presence of. And so it's that's where I live with it kind of now, and just walking day by day, and we'll see. But um, yeah, I love most mornings. Like I said, it's just much more about contemplation and sitting in the presence and waiting for to be loved, not try and earn it, to be patient, receive it, those kind of things. So a squishy external answer for a journey, but it feels really more natural and normal and present and than the ego state stuff of achievement and striving and proving. So
Yeah. No, thank you for that, for sharing that, Eric. And so basically, what you've shared so far is the Enneagram's been really helpful to you in your own personal
mm-hmm,
journey with relationships and professionally, and in your spiritual growth and journey as well.
mm-hmm.
It's almost as if we don't know what would have happened to you had you experienced the Enneagram earlier on in your journey, but it seems to have crossed your path at a good time, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yes.
At a
Excellent
time
time.
when you were possibly ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the intersection of one studying systems,
Okay.
um, because like each Enneagram type, if we're thinking in terms of strategy, right,
Mm.
trying to solve the pain. Well, a lot of churches and systems I've been around have a type, and it's
Okay.
a group of people who kind of came together and they took their faith and they merged it with a strategy, and this is how we're going to do God, and this is how we're going to solve pain, and this is how we're going to be safe.
Wow.
This is how, right? And if you
Yeah.
step back,
Wow.
and you examine and think openly about it, you notice that the spirituality is woven with the ego in
Wow.
systems and in groups and in churches. And it's not because they're bad. It's not because they're trying to make something or do something intentionally, but it's what we do, right?
Mm,
My own way is to like try and figure out how to stay safe and not do pain and ensure my future and my spirit and myself. Well, why wouldn't that somehow also then get infused? So that the timing of Enneagram was very helpful for that too, because I could step back and say, well, there's a system at play here, and it tends towards or leans towards, and then give it space and empathy because they're
mm,
just trying to do the same thing I'm trying to do individually, right?
mm.
Which is stay safe and figure things out and know and etc. So that's been helpful for my journey that way too. Like, how do I community approach like doing faith? Because our stuff also gets woven in there. And so how do we step back and have empathy with that and not not run it through this is how it works for me, so everybody else should be doing it this way, which I did great in my 20s.
Yeah,
I have the answer for everybody, right?
yeah. And certain subtypes in certain environments, whether it's, as you've said, whether it's a church environment, an organization of some kind, and that has the an Enneagram type overlay over it, even with countries,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, so social two in a three-ish overlay country is going to go whoosh, you know, because
Yes.
that's what the culture is already saying. Go, go,
Right.
go, 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 go.
Oh,
And so the ego doesn't need any encouraging; it's already going.
no.
And when
Right.
it merges with the culture, boosh. And then when you've got that in an organization, whether it's a church or
Mhm.
not, you know, it's so I find it interesting how certain subtypes tend to more naturally then, should we say, go to the top.
Mhm.
You know, especially if there's a cultural overlay of it in the country or even in the organization. Um, I find it interesting. Yeah.
Well, in all of my journey, the amount of surrender and humility that just keeps looping back is it the key is
Okay.
really helpful because you can't control it, you can't change it. Have to trust there's a higher power in it if you're going to walk this journey of faith. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
so yeah, that's like one of my morning things I like to return to is just doing that work.
Yeah.
Um, Part of my personal work with Uranio was really good because it ultimately had the stars in the universe and the vastness of everything, and realizing as a social true, we're trying to fill it, to
Wow.
control it. We're trying to be
Wow.
big enough to make sure
God.
and yeah, and basically God, right in the background, but it's fill it with doing and fill it with caring and fill it with and the release and relief of letting that go and
Wow.
realizing your size under the stars in perspective of actual reality to a social two down the road is such a relief. I can stop. It's
Yeah.
not
Wow.
mine to fill. It's mine to just surrender and do my part in the moment in the day. And that's all I'm called to do. I don't have to get any bigger than the space I take up, which
Wow.
I
What a
got done
relief.
with that work with him. And all I wanted to do was get outside under the stars and just realize, okay, I don't have to be any bigger than the space. And it's freedom. We
That's
think
lovely.
it's the answer to fill it, and it's exhausting. Yeah.
That's again, that's profound. Thank
Mhm.
you for sharing that, Eric. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your journey with the Enneagram as it relates to spirituality and Christianity?
Hmm. I think the only other thing I had actually made a note of is just, and you've already talked about it, which is great, is the level of discomfort. Like
Okay.
like the inviting ourselves to lean into discomfort.
Mm.
Our my system, and I think all of our systems tell us something's wrong if we're uncomfortable. Something's
Okay.
wrong if something's too difficult. Something's wrong. And it's not always true. In this journey, we have to do discomfort to move. And it's kind of back to that, like I read my type and I wanted to throw the book. Um,
Mm,
Actually moving into new spaces where we have the ego step aside and we trust and move forward and don't just do what we've always done is scary. It's overwhelming. It's uncomfortable. And but it's what we need. So I guess like that's one of the lessons I've learned here, but I'm constantly challenged here when I move into it and the discomfort rises. I want to kind of flip back to other strategies or do something else. I'm afraid something's wrong.
mm,
So I mean, it's don't know if it's a practice as much as just a notice. I'd encourage people as they walk the journey. Like I've had enough church experience where we're working really hard at affinity. All be the same, all say the same, all believe the same, all act the same, and really eradicate discomfort.
mm,
And then if we push on that at all, the system can get really upset. And it's because like this subconscious want to keep comfort at the front,
mm,
which makes sense. What my if we ask somebody, well, do you want to just do uncomfortable on purpose the rest of your life? Would you excited for that?
yeah,
No, I don't want to
no.
do any of that. Like, so it's natural for us to slide that way, but to challenge ourselves, I guess, to look as we do this journey, it's gonna mean discomfort. To
Yes.
shift and make it inclusive and make space for people to be in and like interact and actually have unity. Unity
Yeah.
means we're all different, but we can still work together without changing everybody else to be like me versus,
Mm,
affinity. We just love making it all the same, get real, real comfortable. And we all
yeah.
gravitate to it. I do it all the time. So I think that's been a big lesson for me is just to keep flipping back and noticing when my discomfort meter is going off. Like, okay, what's this about? Right.
Mm,
So I
yeah,
think that's
no, that,
another note I had.
thank you, Eric. No, that's again, that's so profound as well. If everybody on planet Earth could have that approach, I think the wars would ultimately the wars would stop. You
Yeah.
know, if
hmm
and I just look around at creation, um, and the variety in creation. It's not there isn't one there isn't one tree that is exactly the same. They're of a kind. They're
Yeah.
of a kind, but they're
Yeah.
all beautifully like the whole of creation is beautifully unique and filled with color and life, and it's yeah. And then we come along and say, put it into a little box.
We draw the perfect oak tree and then everybody spends time trying to make their branches fit, right? I love that.
Thank you for sharing that, Eric.
Yeah.
So when it came to discovering your Enneagram type, you've already mentioned that you got this book, you read the book, got to two, whoosh, straight
Yeah.
away connected with it. I am a type
I'm
two.
a two.
So there was not even a question of thinking I'm another type. You were thinking I am definitely. There was never exploring other types.
No, not for me. I mean, I loved reading the connections
Mm,
about, wings or arrows, and I could definitely see how those showed up.
okay.
Um, Further down the road, it was very helpful getting into parts and thinking about that because I have an 8 part. I totally have a 3 part. I have a 1 part
Yeah.
that shows up, right? And so, and a 4, but the 4 is basically ignored because why would we
Okay.
take care of ourselves? We don't have time for that. So I didn't explore them as much as I guess I've been curious more lately. How much have I leaned in on them or how often have those parts played a forward role, or a driver's seat role, um, in service to the social two? Like there's
Mm,
some very three things I've done with speaking and spotlighting and those kind of things that felt really good for a while. That kind of served the purpose of the social too. But
yeah.
but I'm not a three, but I definitely have a lot of tendencies that can get utilized. So like where in those in my journey have those been really forward? Where do they show up? What situations are they forward? So
Mm.
that's how I've kind of looked at the other types.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, Eric. And I love thinking about our wings and our arrows as parts work. I think the parts work is fascinating, actually.
Hmm.
Yeah, really, really. Yeah, good work.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
work. Impactful.
it's very helpful. Hmm.
So you know about two. When did the subtypes come into your world? When did that happen?
Yeah, about 3 years ago, maybe
Okay.
2.5. Um,
Yeah.
my youngest actually, they are one and had been reading a bunch and listening to podcasts and talking about subtype, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm such a social too. It's like if I'm not like the one with a resource, right? I half the time I'm listening. So like it just came about that they were talking about it more and more, and then we did the CP stuff, and all of a sudden it was like we started reading, started looking at B's books and some of that other stuff. We had B's bigger book, the more technical one, around for a couple of years, but I hadn't read it.
Okay.
Um, so my wife had read it, but not gotten too deep in the subtype. So it's only been a couple of years, but it's been phenomenal. It's a
Mm.
game changer for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And so when you heard and read about the social two, you were like, yeah, I'm the social two.
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. We eventually took a test, and my social and self pres are pretty close.
I was wondering that actually from
Yeah.
what you were sharing earlier. Actually, I was going to ask
Hmm.
you how close is your SP so pres to your social? So
Yeah,
that
like
yeah,
a
that's
point different. Yep.
wow. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And sexual is like almost not on the radar, just totally repressed. Yeah. The other
Yeah.
two are very high. Yeah. And neck
Okay.
and neck. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, thank you for sharing that because people that are listening that may not know this, obviously we have a sequence, and
Hmm.
so for you it's social, and self-pres is like so close behind it, and then sexual like repressed. But then that one in the middle, as you know, but other people might not know, the one in the middle can be really close to the dominant, or it can
Hmm.
be really close to the repressed, or somewhere in the middle. And that whole sequence and that variation will also impact how the core type shows up as well.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm similar to you in the sense that I've got a self-preservation dominant. Social's pretty close, and the
Okay.
sexual's way back there.
Yeah.
So like for you, how's the social two? Like you mentioned some things already, but how's like knowing that you're a social two and and having that extra level of awareness? How's that been specifically helpful in your life the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think the main thing about the social too is just the awareness of the extent at which um, everything thinks about everyone else. Like all of the things kind of become subservient to that driver of what everybody else in the room needs. And reading that, for me, over the years, I I've gotten more and more and more tired and exhausted by being in rooms of people and even irritable about it, because I can sense the needs to be met and the things that come up and the inner like driver to go after that, being seen by them, do something for them and be seen, that mirroring element of it, and not wanting to, absolutely not wanting to do any of that. So, but it's helpful just in terms of understanding like this Jedi sense radar where you can like feel everything in the room and how much that is to carry, and how do I allow myself in a sense to dial down the knob and release things and not pay attention and not let it be mine. Um,
Mm,
so it's because it's this constant on to 10 if we're not paying attention. So That's where it's shown up. And now for in my life and my own sanity and my own peace of mind and my own, it's like dialing it back versus becoming avoidant. Because
Interesting.
that's what I've been doing, right? Over time, I've become more and more avoidant of social interaction because it's just so much. That
Mm,
doesn't work when you're working in therapy or with groups. You can't avoid people, right?
yeah.
So, like, how do I dial the knob down and allow? And that's where my practice as a therapist has been so wonderful because I've had to build the muscle. That's yours over there, and this is mine over here, and
Mm,
keeping that distinction and not over helping, not over infusing. Um, so it's kind of a loop of an answer, but like that's where it shows up, right? Is the over reading and the over helping and the over engaging and the over being important and special and all of the things that show up.
yeah.
Um, Dialing that back and holding my own space. So,
No. Yeah, that's great to hear. And as a result, as you've been doing that work,
mhm,
have you noticed more energy in yourself?
mhm.
Yeah,
Yep, yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
good.
you're not taking it all in or trying to hold it all or engage with any of it or right. It's
Yeah.
to do that all, it's too big. It's that thing that, back to Uranio, I can hold my own space. I don't have to fill
Mm,
up the room and get in touch with everything and everyone. Um, I can just
yeah,
be in my own space, and it does. Yeah, it helps preserve and keep my energy where it belongs, and yeah, much less exhausting.
yeah. And obviously, going inside to the arrow to four and going, I've got needs as well, and I'm gonna start, looking after myself because I've been so busy looking after everyone else. And then going to eight, like you said before, making those boundaries. That's really, really good.
Yeah, yeah.
For some of us, it's about going towards people, but for others of us, it's about moving away from people.
Hmm.
Because the growth work can be different, obviously, depending on what the strategy of the ego is.
Hmm.
Um, so if you feel comfortable sharing, what have you been able to do with this new energy that you've got without spending it so much on the outside?
It's a great question. I've teetered on this brink of personality burnout and doing work with that. And so trying to figure that out. And I realized about a year and a half ago that the social two was also, or at least the two was co opting energy from any hobby I picked up. So if I would take a weekend
Right.
off from people and I would go and do journaling or I would go and do running or I would go and do like any hobby became relaxing, but all of a sudden it got strategized into you have to do this thing in order to get enough energy back in order to go out in order to please all the people.
Whoa.
So the
Yeah.
subtle back door and all of the things that I enjoyed all of a sudden, it's like Pirates of the Caribbean, where Barbosa bites the apple and it turns to ash in his mouth. The
Mm,
hobbies started feeling like that, like they'd been turned into a tool that I could no longer like self care and separate and calm and rest in. They became used. So that's a long answer to your question, which is I don't know right now because I'm actually trying to go back into the things that I know are from me that I enjoy and that I would like to take part in or give myself to, my energy to for me. And I have a list, but they're challenging right now to approach because when I approach them, I actually end up in an ego battle between the self and the energy and that part of me trying to co-opt it. So I've actually been working with my coach about like watching that and noticing what's happening and journaling that and like trying to move towards and listen and get downloads more on what is it I'm getting ushered into versus trying to decide it because the strategizer's so sneaky.
mm,
So it's been really complicated to kind of figure that out. So a lot of time now is just spent being and
Mm,
resting and trying not to do much more than read a fun book and not
mm,
engage anything. So my phone can become a problem because it's such a challenging battle. Then I just want to like numb and check out. Like this is
yeah.
too hard to figure out. So um, that's where I'm at right now. Is actually just trying to like weave my way back into like what's at my center that wants to create and exist and bring out, right? Instead of
Mm,
instead of like some tool or something I should or could do to create energy or create rest or create. It's just, it's interesting how deep the strategy goes and how subtle it is.
mm.
So figuring it out.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that. Like you've said, it just goes to show how subtle and cunning and crafty this ego is, you know. So it's great that you've got that awareness. And I also want just to say, you know, for a type two with the passion of pride, to say, you know, publicly, I don't know. That's a very humble thing to say, and
Mm.
it just it's a credit to your inner growth work, Eric. It's a
No,
credit to you,
thanks, Matt.
and also that you're able to just to be honest and say, and to it's reassuring for people listening that they can know that we haven't arrived. We're on a journey,
Mhm.
and it's okay to be where we are at on the journey. You know, and not
Mhm.
talking retrospectively. Oh yeah, you know I have I've arrived. I'm
Yeah,
arrived.
yeah,
We are arriving.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
No, thank
becoming,
you.
and that's the,
Yeah,
I mean,
becoming.
just such another level of surrender that
Yeah.
it's such an ego wrestle. Yeah, work with Uranio is helpful too because for me, I'd always framed it up as control. I'm controlling. I'm trying to control everything, and well, he's like, it's deeper. It's about power. It's about
Mm,
not feeling you have any and trying to make it or take it or control it or craft it or all of those things, right? And it's like, whoa. So just like sitting back in that space of not knowing and allowing and becoming, and it does the opposite. Like I don't have any power in this finding out what's next, and not trying to
mm,
pick it back up. But it's really hard. I just want to have a plan and I want to have fun and I want to make it look good.
yeah.
So, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is challenging, and we would have heard Arania say how people that do spiritual work and don't do psychological work can
Mhm.
become dangerous, but people
Mhm.
who just do the psychological work and don't do add the spiritual element to it are missing out.
Mhm.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is like you're doing the psychological work, but leaning into the spiritual side of it as well. Now, for many of us, we might have different names for that and different an understanding. But you know, I think there's only so much us humans can do, and then we need that third force. We need that external. I, I, we might call it God, Holy Spirit,
Mhm.
coming in and saying, I cannot, I, I just can't fix this,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you can, and you're speaking to me, and I am open to what you want. And like you've said, surrendering, it's scary,
Yeah.
but it's an awesome adventure at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm. And has its an element of freedom, which you can't
yeah,
know
yes,
until you let go. Yeah.
yeah, and that's scary, isn't
Yep.
it?
Yes.
I know it is scary. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Eric.
Yeah,
Is there
sure.
anything else you'd like to share that I haven't asked that you'd like to share? Anything about the Enneagram, your type?
I think so. It's really been enjoyable to like just walk this through again and share it because it pulls it all to the forefront for
Mm,
me again instead of like we can get back into our patterns and doing life and um it's so good to just draw it out and be reflective with you. So I really appreciate just getting to share my story.
Thank you, Eric. And it's been a real blessing as well for me and for everyone that's going to watch this to hear all that you've shared. It's been incredibly insightful. And
Mm,
I think it's going to be really encouraging for people as well that are on the path
good.
or that are just starting it. We're in this together and it's not easy. We don't have to have
Oh,
all the answers, but
mhm,
it's ultimately it's worth it, basically.
mm. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mm.
And you just spoke it as well, like our egos are so crafty and powerful and set
Well,
up to protect us. So on autopilot mode, being asleep or however we want to understand it and word it, it's easier to go in the direction that the ego wants us to go in,
mhm.
than it is to grow, because than it is to be uncomfortable, than it is to, as I would word it, follow Jesus. Like
Yeah.
reading about him, reading about it, yeah, that's great. But what about actually following him? No, whoa,
Mhm.
whoa, whoa, whoa. It's scary stuff. like the
Yeah, I had a spiritual director who once asked me, what would it be like for you to imagine you working something meaningless and digging in the mud the rest of your life and nobody saw it?
Wow, for a social tea, like not just a social tea, but wow, what a question.
Yeah, and that rattled my cage on a lot of levels. Yeah.
It
It's like
rattled
the
the
year
ego,
before
yeah.
that, the year before the Enneagram.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yep. And so it sent me actually into about 6 months of walking and praying for humility. And
Wow.
God, the universe, wherever you want to go with that, answered consistently. And so when I came to Enneagram and read the two and the difference between the pride and that the healing was humility, and
Oh my
actually went through about
goodness.
6 months of experiencing that with the spiritual director, and it was rough. But the truth, that's why I was like, I wanted to throw the book because it felt like everybody else knew me and knew about it and knew like, and I just been blind and dumb. Like,
Yeah,
there it is. It's in front of you. So when you say like encouragement to other people and that this is hard and that like yes, and there is like a third force. There is an outer force to this whole thing. And just being able to like take a breath and allow this to be
yeah,
hard and release out of our breath a little of the fear. We're not all alone,
no,
right? We're not abandoned. We're not stranded, but this is a difficult climb and that's okay. Yep.
yeah. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, that's again another profound thing.
Mhm.
Um, what's the saying? The truth will set you free. The truth will
Mhm.
set you free, but it will hurt like hell.
Yep. Yeah, it's very hard, but very good. Mm.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for sharing, Eric. Um, so I know that you also work professionally with the Enneagram. Can you
Yes.
share with us what it is you do, where people can find out about your work, what you have to offer, and where people can just come and find you if they want to make contact?
No, sure. So I do therapy as well as coaching.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not a lot more than that. I mean, it's good stuff. We are looking at actually expanding a little bit into doing some small group work and just educationally and experientially in our community around Enneagram in the next year. So I'll be doing some of that. Um, we are at Blue Turtles Counseling .com. Blue Turtles, everybody asks why. And
Yeah.
if you are familiar with the band The Police, Sting's first solo album was Dream of the Blue Turtles.
Ah,
And in there, he has a song called Fortress Around Your Heart, which is all about him trying to re-reach his wife after years and years of challenges. And he has to build a bridge because he can't fill the chasm he's created. So we actually picked Blue Turtles because of the song from Sting, but it also works great for putting up cute blue turtles and decorating in bright colors.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
love that.
and Eric, and my email is just Eric at blueturtlescounseling.com. So we're out there on the web, or an email if you want to get in touch with me.
Thank you, Eric. Well, I'm gonna put links to that in the
Oh,
description
fantastic.
box
Yeah,
below,
thank you.
so people can just go click straight there and go straight to you. And
Perfect.
I don't know if there's also another piece of significance with the fact that it's got sting and the sting of like, we've got to feel the sting before we can heal the sting.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I grew up, I don't know, it was in that phase of Walkmans and headphones, like
Oh
sitting
yeah,
on buses going to school, and I listened to that album when it came out. It's been with me forever, but years ago during this journey, that song played again on the radio. I'm like, oh wow, it's so profound, the challenge we have in relationship to repair. So that's why
yeah.
we picked it. Hmm.
And you heard it. You heard
Hmm.
it.
Totally differently.
Yeah,
Yeah, for the first time. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Eric. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close off?
No, this has been great, man. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Well, thank you once again for all that you've shared. It's been so insightful, and I look forward to hearing over the coming months and years the next part of the journey. I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
Okay. Great.
Thanks, Eric. Bye bye.
Bye.